On Radio 97, we are talking law. If you have a question that's a legal one that you'd like an opinion on, a free opinion on, Despina happy to do that for you. Go to the website, radio97.com.au. There's a couple of ways of contacting us. Just send through that information and we will answer your question on the radio, radio97.com.au.
And this segment is quite interesting because the new Land Tax Amendment Act will affect people buying property in Queensland, but it might also affect people that already own property that have never paid this land tax before. So that doesn't sound good. So many people be freaking out. So Despina, what is the update? What's changing?
So you are correct. So I tell you, the amount of people I talk to on a daily basis about land tax, it is up there. It's high because a lot of people don't realise that land tax may affect them when they're buying property. So to be clear, first of all, your residence, right? So if you have a home and you own it, you live in it, that's completely exempt from land tax, right? Always has been. So we're talking about property that you buy as a holiday home or an investment that you're renting out, okay? So you may be up for land tax. And as you say, with these changes that we're going to talk about, if you haven't paid land tax before, you might now pay land tax because of this change. And it's quite significant in relation to land tax. So land tax, like any other tax, is usually on a sliding scale. So if we go back to basics, in Queensland, what we have is we have thresholds. So typically, before this change comes into effect, typically what you'll find is if you buy property and the unimproved land value, so we're talking about the land value, not what you bought it for, right? So if the unimproved land value, if you're buying it as an individual, is under 600,000, you wouldn't pay land tax. You'd only start paying land tax if you are over that threshold. Now, if you bought property in a company or a trust, that threshold is lowered. It's 350,000. All right. So if you were never over that threshold for the unimproved land value, you would not have paid land tax in the past. So what is changing is they're actually closing a little loophole that we've had in Queensland. Yes, I know. They've caught up with the loophole and they're slamming it shut.
Oh, no.
So what was happening, and it's still happening now before the changes come into effect, is if you had bought property interstate or you owned property interstate and then you were buying property in Queensland, the property held interstate was never added as part of the unimproved land value. So it wasn't taken into account. So you could come into Queensland, you could buy freely a property that would be under that threshold I talked about, and you wouldn't pay land tax. Right? Of course, if you started accumulating more properties in Queensland in the same name, then you might be getting over the threshold. But this loophole is now being closed in terms of if you own property interstate, okay, that's now going to be taken into account and aggregated together with your Queensland property. So if listeners are out there going, oh, I'm horrified, wow, didn't know about this, you better keep listening because it will affect you. So we're talking about the Revenue Legislation Amendment Bill. So that bill was introduced following the announcement of land tax reforms. I think it was part of the 2021-22 budget update. So the bill was actually passed 24th of June this year, but the changes don't come into effect until 1st of January 2023. So what we're talking about is we're talking about Queensland land tax assessments in the 23-24 financial year. So we're not talking immediate, we're talking in the future, but we want to tell listeners now because we want to plan, don't we? We want to plan for ahead for the next 6 months or so to get your affairs maybe in order, get that advice, look at what you own. Yes, if you're thinking of selling, maybe this might affect your timing of selling property. Yeah. So they're definitely changing a loophole. So now if you have property in Queensland, you have property, say, in New South Wales, and if you aggregate those two, you might find that you would now be over that threshold. That's in Queensland. And then it gets aggregated and then it gets apportioned. So then you may be ending up paying land tax now on your Queensland properties because of this change.
So are we
Wow.
talking about residents of Queensland, or are we talking about anyone who has who actually owns land in Queensland? So you could live in any other state in
We could
Australia.
live anywhere,
Yeah.
just own property in Queensland. And
Okay.
that's the point, because we're talking about investment properties. So
Yeah.
I have a lot of clients that live interstate that still remain in interstate, but they're buying investment properties in Queensland.
Yeah.
And we talk about land tax because they go, oh, is land tax applicable? And I say, well, if the unapproved land value of that property exceeds the certain thresholds we have, then yes, you start paying on a sliding scale, like lots of other tax that we have, like stamp duty, capital gains tax. So this is no different, land tax. But now any property that they have in other states in Australia that are investment properties will be aggregated as part of calculating if they pay land tax for these Queensland properties.
So the Queensland government, they will be checking up on you. They will presumably have some sort of way of checking with the other states to make sure that you're telling the truth, yeah?
Well, this is an interesting point, because what I've read so far is that what they're saying is the commissioner is going to start issuing pre-assessment notices to owners that they identify as owning land in Queensland and interstate. As to how they're going to identify those landowners and the process they're going to use, I don't know. It'll be interesting, yes. But apparently they certainly will find a way, and then owners will be are required to notify the commissioner of their interstate land holdings. So they're either got to confirm on the pre-assessment notice that they receive, or they have to tell them, look, no, it's amending, I'm selling property, or whatever the situation is. But it's once you get the pre-assessment notice, you've only got a very short period of time to notify the commissioner. And it's really important that you be honest, as always, and you be honest with Mr. Commissioner, because if you're not, then of course there will be civil penalties that, yes, you might have against you. Yes, so the civil penalties are actually up to $14,375 if you fail to notify the commissioner of your interstate land holdings.
Wow. So if you have quite a few properties, say, I don't know, 4 or 5, and you're thinking about selling, and you don't want to end up paying that land tax, would your professional opinion be maybe, get onto it now? So obviously you're not worrying about it once it kicks into that 2023, 2024 financial year?
Yeah, so a lot of investors do buy property around financial years, particularly. This new change is coming in as of the calendar year, 1st of January. So, and that's land tax assessments are usually issued August, September, October in a given financial year. So I think it's a good time that you go and have a look at these changes. How many properties do you have in Queensland and interstate? Is it going to impact you significantly or potentially moving forward? And then perhaps take some steps in the next few months or not, but at least be aware of it. So this show allows us to inform landowners out there of this change that's coming into effect. And the thing too is that now that Queensland's made this change, we'll have to wait and see if the other states
Others may follow.
may follow. Yeah. So for once, other states will follow Queensland, whereas Queensland usually follows other states.
The other way around. Yeah.
Yes.
So are there any other states that are doing this? Just Queensland?
And not that I'm aware of. So it's going to be something that we're going to be looking at with much interest in the future.
Leading the way, Queensland.
Yes.
Thank you so much again, Despina. If anyone does want to get in touch with you directly, where can they go?
So they can phone the office 55291 294. They can email info@prialalegal.com.au. And of course, this segment will be up on YouTube again this week.
Very good. And we'll do it all again next week.
We will. See you guys then.
Bye.